Trump says total reset negotiated with China during tariff talks in Geneva. President Donald Trump says great progress was made with Beijing amid tariff battle. President Donald Trump announced on Truth Social Saturday night that great progress had been made during weekend trade negotiations with China. During the meeting in Geneva, Switzerland, between U.S. officials, including Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and a Chinese delegation, many things were discussed and much was agreed to, Trump said. No major breakthrough was announced in discussions that lasted over 10 hours, the Associated Press reported, and negotiations are scheduled to continue Sunday. The administration announced a round of tariffs April 2nd and later imposed a 145% tariff on Chinese goods, after reducing reciprocal tariffs on other countries. For 90 days to a baseline of 10%, China raised tariffs on U.S. goods to 125%. On Thursday, Trump told reporters at the White House China very much wanted to make a deal, ending the intense tariff battle. While the president did not provide many specifics Saturday night, he described the agreement as a total reset negotiated in a friendly but constructive manner. We want to see, for the good of both China and the U.S., an opening up of China to American business, Trump wrote in the Post. Great progress made. Trump says 80% tariff on China seems right, ahead of weekend talks with Beijing, a longtime supporter of tariffs. Trump argued that fair duties could address the nation's record $1.2 trillion trade deficit from 2024 and encourage the return of U.S. manufacturing jobs. Bessent said in April the tariffs could cost China up to 10 million jobs, making Chinese tariffs unsustainable. Even if there is a drop in the tariffs, they could lose 5 million jobs, Bessent told White House reporters. Remember that we are the deficit country. They sell almost 5 times more goods to us than we sell to them. So, the onus will be on them to take off these tariffs. White House announces U.S. China trade deal, offers few details. The White House on Sunday announced a trade deal with China without providing specifics, after Trump administration officials spent the weekend negotiating with their Chinese counterparts. While details of the deal are still unclear, any de-escalation in the ongoing trade war could bring much-needed relief to a global economy that has been roiled since President Donald Trump's April 2nd tariff announcement. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said Sunday that the trade talks that took place in Geneva over the weekend were productive. He said the talks yielded a great deal of productivity and that he would give more details in a complete briefing on Monday morning. Bessent also said that he and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer both spoke to President Donald Trump on Saturday evening, and he is fully informed about the discussions. Greer said during remarks on Sunday that the officials reached some form of a deal, but did not provide any specifics. He hailed the discussions as very constructive. It's important to understand how quickly we were able to come to agreement, which reflects that perhaps the differences were not so large as may be thought, Greer said. We're confident that the deal we struck with our Chinese partners will help us work toward resolving that national emergency, he added. The Chinese officials who participated in the meetings also spoke positively. Vice Premier of the People's Republic of China, He Feng, said the meeting achieved substantial progress and reached important consensus. The two sides agreed on establishing a consultation mechanism for trade and economic issues, He Feng said. China International Trade Representative Li Chenggang suggested that a statement would be coming soon with more details on the negotiations, but did not say when the statement would be released. As we say back in China, if the dishes are delicious, then timing is not a matter, Chenggang said. I think no matter when this statement is released, it's going to be a big news. Good news for the world. The high-stakes negotiations in Switzerland this weekend come amid widespread economic uncertainty stemming from the U.S. China trade war. The two nations have been engaged in a tariff tit-for-tat in the week since Trump announced 145% tariffs on Beijing. In response, China raised its levies on U.S. goods to 125%. The standoff has roiled the financial markets and sparked concerns of fewer goods and rising prices for consumers. Trump praised the first day of discussions, writing that the U.S. officials had a very good meeting today with China in a Saturday Truth Social post. Many things discussed, much agreed to, Trump wrote. A total reset negotiated in a friendly but constructive manner. Besant said that he and Greer met with the Vice Premier of China, in addition to two vice ministers, who the Treasury Secretary called integrally involved in discussions. May 11, 2025, Donald Trump Presidency News. Stock futures rise after both sides report progress in U.S. China. Trade negotiations. Stock futures rose this evening after Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said substantial progress was made during EU trade negotiations with Chinese officials in Switzerland, potentially thawing tensions kickstarted by President Donald Trump's escalating tariff policy. Chinese officials echoed the U.S. sentiment, with the country's vice premier saying the sides had reached an important consensus. Dow futures jumped 1.10%, or 456 points. The S&P 500 futures rose 1.25%, or 70.75 points, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite futures went up 1.44%, or 289.25 points. As of 6:15 p.m., E.T. Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer joined other U.S. officials in Geneva to meet with Chinese officials after Trump imposed sweeping 145% tariffs on most Chinese goods last month. China retaliated with 125% on U.S. goods. Markets have whipsawed in recent weeks due to uncertainty about Trump's changing tariff policies. U.S. and China reached important consensus in trade talks, Chinese vice premier says. The U.S. and China made substantial progress and reached an important consensus in their trade talks, Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng said today, following high-level meetings over the weekend. He described the discussions as candid, in-depth, and constructive, saying both sides agreed to establish a trade consultation mechanism for future discussions. China and the United States will finalize the relevant details as soon as possible and will issue a joint statement reached at the talks. On May 12th, a readout from the Chinese delegation said, top U.S. officials also signaled positive developments after this weekend's talks in Geneva. A deal between the U.S. and China, averting more damage from the trade war spurred by President Donald Trump's tariffs, would be welcome news for the global economy. Top Trump economic advisor says about 24 trade deals are in the works amid progress with China. National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett reiterated comments from recent days that the United States has about 24 trade deals in the works. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer are working together on the deals, Hassett said today on Fox News' Sunday Morning Futures with Maria Bartiromo. The discussions are an effort to solidify deals during President Donald Trump's 90-day pause on his so-called reciprocal tariffs. The trade deals. All look a little bit like the UK deal, but each one is bespoke, Hassett said, referring to a broad agreement struck with British negotiators last week. Each one's a little bit different because different countries have different things that they've been doing wrong to us, different things they care a lot about. Hassett did not specify which countries the United States may have deals with. On Friday, he told CNBC that about 24 deals are this close to being resolved, and the deals are going to be very settling for markets. Hassett spoke with Bartiromo shortly before Greer and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent emerged from negotiations with Chinese officials in Geneva to report substantial progress on a potential deal with Beijing. Zelensky says he's ready to meet Putin for talks in Turkey and repeats call for ceasefire. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he is prepared to meet his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin for talks in Turkey this week, in what would be their first meeting since Moscow launched its full-scale invasion. Zelensky said a full and lasting ceasefire starting Monday would provide the necessary basis for diplomacy, but did not specify that this would be a precondition for attending the talks. We await a full and lasting ceasefire, starting from tomorrow, to provide the necessary basis for diplomacy. There is no point in prolonging the killings, Zelensky wrote today on X, and I will be waiting for Putin in Turkey on Thursday. Personally, I hope that this time the Russians will not look for excuses. How we got here. Zelensky's message came less than an hour after U.S. President Donald Trump wrote on Truth Social that Ukraine should immediately agree to meet with Russian officials on Thursday. Trump's comments undermined efforts by Kyiv's European allies to pressure Putin with an ultimatum: agree to an unconditional 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine by Monday or face massive new sanctions. European leaders have been steadfast this weekend in demanding that Putin agree to the ceasefire before any direct talks take place. The Russian leader has ignored the ultimatum, instead proposing the direct talks in Turkey. If the talks took place, it would mark the first meeting between Putin and Zelensky since 2019. Trump urges Ukraine to accept Russia's invitation for direct talks this week. President Donald Trump is urging Ukraine to accept an invitation from Russia to meet for direct peace talks in Turkey on Thursday, without the condit.